Hi everyone, welcome back to the Be Kind, Be Happy podcast. My name is Byron, and for today's storytime episode, I'll be continuing with the Platform Sutra. Now we're actually up to chapter 4. Just a quick recap. Chapter 1 was about the background of Sixth Patriarch Neng. So that talks about his enlightenment, his backstory, how he became the Sixth Patriarch of Buddhism, basically. Number 2 is about prajñā, which means wisdom. And so in this chapter, we talk about the sudden teaching of Neng, which is basically talking about how to see the self-nature instantaneously, immediately, without having to go through the arduous practices that can potentially be for eons and eons. So how to identify or how to realize the self-nature instantaneously, and that is why the Platform Sutra is so highly regarded in Zen practice. The third chapter was about questions. Basically, the assembly was able to ask questions, and they were asking about the Bodhidharma. So asking why at that time when he was introducing or trying to introduce Buddhism to China, he came from India. The emperor at the time, Emperor Wu, was questioning him about how much merits he has, and he was explaining why he had zero merits, despite building monasteries, raising the monks, and doing vegetarian feasts. Despite all those, why was he still having zero merit? So that was a very good insight as to that. Then also he was explaining questions about the Pure Land, how to understand the Western Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss practice. That was also very important. And so now up to chapter 4, where we are talking about meditation. So a lot of the Buddhist practitioners view Buddhism as just the practice of meditation and using meditation to attain enlightenment. Clearly in this sutra, the emphasis is not on meditation, but on understanding the self-nature immediately by transcending dualistic concepts, dualistic ideas. But meditation can also be used to understand the self-nature, to understand fundamental reality. And so this is why they dedicated, or this is why there is one complete chapter dedicated to the practice of meditation. Master addressed assembly. Good friends, our teaching takes meditation and wisdom as its fundamental. Everyone, do not say in your delusion that meditation and wisdom are different. Meditation and wisdom are of one essence, not different. Meditation is the essence of wisdom, and wisdom is function of meditation. At times of wisdom, meditation exists in that wisdom. At times of meditation, wisdom exists in that meditation. Understand this doctrine. This is the equivalent study of meditation and wisdom. All of you who study the way, do not say that they are different, which with meditation prior to and generating wisdom, or that wisdom prior to and generating meditation. If your view of them is like this, then the Dharma would have two characteristics. This would be to say something good with your mouth, but to have that which is not good in your minds. To make meditation and wisdom falsely existent, to consider them as not. If there is good in both mouth and mind, and if internal and external are identical, then meditation and wisdom be equivalent. One should understand oneself that spiritual cultivation does not exist in argumentation. If you argue about which is prior and which is secondary, you are just like all the other deluded. Not to desist from competition is to increase the illusion of selfhood. One who does not transcend the four characteristics this way, one will not transcend the four characteristics. So this is to say that one should not be testing in arguments with other people about what is meditation and what is wisdom, what comes first, what comes second, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. The reason being, if anyone is arguing and contesting certain concepts and ideas with someone else, then he is attaching to one side. And attachment to one side is the same as attaching to the other side, because they create each other. Good creates bad, right creates wrong. And so by attaching to one side, you're actually attaching to both sides. And so that is not the practice of the way, according to Patriarch. Good friends, how is it that meditation and wisdom are equivalent? It is like the light of a lamp. The light exists, when the lamp exists, there is light. When there is no lamp, there is darkness. The lamp is the essence of the light. The light is the function of the lamp. Although the names are different, in essence, they are fundamentally identical. Dharma of meditation, wisdom, is just like this. This is saying that meditation is likened to the lamp, wisdom is likened to the light. They create each other and they are functions of one another, and so one should not be identifying them as different, separate things, because you cannot have one without the other. Talking about them as separate things, almost like saying that one comes first, or that they are mutually independent. But that's not the case. According to the Venerable Master, Queen Neng, they are mutually dependent. So they create one another, and you cannot have one without the other. Carrying forward, Master addressed the assembly. Good friends, the samadhi of the single practice is to always practice the single direct mind in all one's actions, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. The Vilamakirti Sutra says, the straightforward mind is the place of enlightenment. The straightforward mind is pure land. Do not allow your mental practices to become twisted while merely speaking of straightforwardness with your mouth. If you speak of the samadhi of the single practice with your mouth, you will not practice the straightforward mind. Just practice the straightforward mind and be without attachments within all the dharmas. Basically, one can realize the straightforward mind. One transcends the dualities of all concepts. That is the place of enlightenment, and that is the pure land. What is the straightforward mind? Here it says, the samadhi of the single practice is to practice the single direct mind in all one's actions. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that, because the more I describe it, the more I'm using concepts, and that is not how one understands this. Okay. The deluded person is attached to the characteristics of dharmas and grasps onto the samadhi of the single practice, merely saying that he always sits without moving and without falsely activating the mind, and that is the samadhi of the single practice. Have an interpretation such as this is to be the same as an insentient being, the insentient object. This is rather to impede the causes and conditions of enlightenment. So this is very, very tricky to understand, because what he's saying is the samadhi of single practice is not just sitting and not thinking about anything. That is like falsely activating. That is like you're not activating the mind, and that is not it. Because if you're just suppressing thoughts, suppressing ideas, suppressing the thinking mind, then that is like an insentient object. So my interpretation of this is that we just be as natural as we can. So we don't impede anything, we just see. It's like a realization, it's a seeing, a knowing, not an action. It's not like you're suppressing anything, it's not like you're doing anything beyond just knowing. Knowing what? Knowing. I'm just gonna leave it as knowing. Good friends, one's enlightenment, one's way, or Tao, must flow freely. How could it be stagnated? When the mind does not reside in the dharmas, one's enlightenment flows freely. For the mind to reside in the dharmas is called fettering oneself. If you say that always sitting without moving is it, then you are just like Sariputra meditating in the forest, for which he was scolded by Vilamakirti. Vilamakirti is a very, very influential bodhisattva that practiced as a lay person, but his wisdom transcended that of all the great bodhisattvas and all the great monks within the assembly of Buddha. There is actually a sutra called the Vilamakirti Sutra, which is the practice, bodhisattva practice for lay people that transcends the monastic practice. Very, very deep and interesting, and we would definitely find time to explore that sutra one day. But anyways, so here he's saying that one's enlightenment, one's way, or the Tao, must flow freely. So it's not about suppressing the mind. When the mind does not reside in the dharmas, one's enlightenment flows freely. So the dharmas of life, what is good and bad, what is right and wrong, what you like and don't like, all your feelings and thoughts and concepts and everything should be flowing freely without us activating a particular way of dealing with it. For the mind to reside in the dharmas, called fettering oneself. So here he's saying that we don't reside in the dharmas, and if we do reside in the dharmas, that is to say to become attached to the dharmas, that is like we are just fettering ourselves. We are creating layers upon layers. We are deepening our ignorance. Good friends, there are also those who teach meditation in terms of viewing the mind, contemplating tranquility, motionlessness, and non-activation. You are supposed to make an effort on the basis of these. These deluded people do not understand, in their grasping, become mixed up like all of you here. You should understand that such superficial teachings are greatly mistaken. So, we do not want to abide the mind in anything. To say that the teaching of mind meditation is to abide the mind or on contemplation of tranquility, motionlessness, non-action, those are still abiding the mind on a particular practice or concept that is dualistic in nature. And that is still grasping, and that is not how you practice, according to Neng. The master addressed the assembly. Good friends, the correct teaching is fundamentally without either sudden or gradual. It is human nature that is either clever or dull. Deluded people cultivate gradually, while enlightened people suddenly conform to the truth. If you realize your own fundamental mind and see your own fundamental nature, there will be no such distinctions. So, thus it is that gradual and sudden and gradual are posited as provisional names. An enlightened being, someone that has awakened to self-nature, does not make distinctions such as clever or dull, such as sudden or gradual. because they have understood to transcend those. When we talk about sudden and gradual, these are just provisional names. Talk about it from the side of concepts, but yes, they are just merely provisional names. Good friends, since the past, this teaching of ours has first taken non-thought as its central doctrine, the formless as its essence, and non-abiding as its fundamental. The formless is to transcend characteristics within the context of characteristics. So this is a very vital distinction. Again, formless is to transcend characteristics within the context of characteristics. So you're not escaping it, you're not avoiding it, but you're within it and transcending it from within. Non-thought is to be without thought in the concepts of thought. And non-abiding is to be considered one's fundamental nature, that all worldly things are empty, with no consideration of retaliation, whether good or evil, pleasant or ugly, enemy or friend, etc., during times of words, fights, and disputations. So, this is to say that when we are transcending through understanding formlessness, non-thought and non-abiding, we are doing so within the context of this concept. We transcend characteristics within characteristics. We transcend thought within thought. We abide in non-abiding. Don't abide within abiding. So why that is the case is because we have to realize, this is just my own interpretation, is that we have to realize that form is created against formless. Characteristics is created against non-characteristic. Thought is created against non-thought. So to achieve formless, we don't just find it somewhere, we find it within form. Because form creates formlessness. Formlessness creates form. There's no such thing as form outside of, there's no such thing as formless outside of form. So you transcend characteristics within the context of characteristics. Beyond the context of characteristics, there is no such thing as characteristics as a fundamental concept. No such thing. The same as thought. To be without thought in the context of thought. If we're talking about thought, non-thought as a separate concept, it doesn't exist. It only exists within the context of form, because within the context of thought, because non-thought is not no such thing as non-thought unless you define it against thought. This is actually like one of the deepest understandings, that you don't transcend something by leaving it, escaping it, avoiding it, but you have to understand it within it. You understand suffering within suffering. You understand joy. You find joy in suffering. You find wisdom within ignorance. You find greed you transcend greed within greed. Within continuing moments of thought, one should not think of the previous mental realm. If one thinks of the previous thought, the present thought, and the later thought, one's thought will be continuous without cease. This is called fettered. If one's thoughts do not abide in dharmas, this is to be unfettered. Thus, it is that non-abiding is taken as the fundamental. Good friends, to transcend all the characteristics externally is called the formless. To be able to transcend characteristics is for the essence of the dharmas to be pure. Thus, it is that the formless is taken as the essence. Good friends, for one's mind to remain undefiled within the sensory realms is called non-thought. Okay, so for one's mind to remain undefiled within the sensory realms, this is called non-thought. Within one's own thoughts, one should always transcend the realms. One should not generate the mind relative to the realms. If one does not think of the 100 things, then thoughts will be completely eliminated. So again, this is to say that we abide within the sensory realms, but we are undefiled by it. We abide within one's thoughts, but we transcend thought. That is to say, we transcend thought within the thought. If we don't have a thought, then we cannot transcend thought. So you don't transcend thought away from thought, you transcend thoughts within the thoughts. Same as to say the sensory realms, we don't transcend the sensory realms outside of it, but we transcend sensory realms within it. If one does not think of the 100 things, then thought will be completely eliminated. It is greatly mistaken. By the way, this is to say that if one does not think of the 100 things, this is a consequence of practicing. This is not the practice. The practice is not to not think. To not think becomes a byproduct of the practice. Then all thoughts will be eliminated. Again, we're not trying to eliminate thoughts, but the thoughts will be eliminated as a consequence of remaining undefiled, remaining undetached, and constantly achieving transcendence from within. It is greatly mistaken to believe that as soon as thought is eradicated, one dies, is born in some other location. Think on this, you who are studying the way. If you cannot recognize your own mistakes regarding the meaning of Dharma, how much will you mislead others? To be deluded oneself and not see this is to slander the Buddhist scriptures. Thus it is that non-thought is taken as the doctrine. Good friends, why is it that non-thought is taken as the central doctrine? If you depend merely on oral explanations of seeing the nature, like a deluded person, you will have thoughts relative to the realms and can activate false views regarding those thoughts. And from this will be generated all the enervating defilements and false thoughts. There is in the self-nature fundamentally not a single Dharma that can be perceived. To think that there were any would be a false explanation, a disaster, a false view of enervating defilements. Therefore, this teaching takes non-thought as the central doctrine. Taking non-thought as a central doctrine is because there is in the self-nature fundamentally not a single Dharma that can be perceived. And that is within that context that non-thought is a central doctrine. Not to say that we don't think of thoughts, we eliminate thoughts. That comes after. But the reason why non-thought is taken as the central doctrine was fundamentally there is not a single Dharma that can be perceived. And everything that we perceive is because of misunderstanding, because of misperception. And from that context, non-thought is the central. Fundamentally, not a single Dharma can be perceived. My understanding is this also applies to self-nature. Fundamentally, there is no self-nature, but we are only talking about self-nature within the context of trying to find self-nature. But even that is a Dharma that cannot fundamentally be perceived. Good friends, what is negated by the non? Wu in Chinese means. What kind of thing is thought? Non means to be without the characteristic of duality, to be without the mind of enervating defilements. So that is what non means. To not side with the side of the dualistic concept. Thought is to think of the fundamental nature of suchness. Suchness is the essence of thought, and thought is the function of suchness. So thought is to think of the fundamental nature of suchness. Suchness is the essence of thought. Thought is the suchness. So suchness here means emptiness. Suchness here means self-nature, what is always ever abiding. And to say that this is the essence of thought and thought is the function of suchness, say that form and emptiness are one and the same. Because through form, rise to emptiness, give rise to form. And so this is how we think of thought. Thought is like form. You thought as suchness. We view form as emptiness. They are one and the same and not separate. Just like meditation and wisdom, we view them as one and the same. Thought is activated in the self-nature of suchness. It is not the case that the eyes, ears, nose, and tongue are able to think. It is because of the self-nature of suchness that thoughts are activated. If suchness were non-existent, eyes and ears, forms and sounds would be simultaneously destroyed. Good friends, thoughts are activated from the self-nature of suchness. Although the six sensory faculties possess perceptual cognition, they do not defile the myriad realms, yet the true nature is always autonomous. Therefore, the sutra says, when one is able to discriminate well the characteristics of the dharmas, then this is to be unmoving within the cardinal mean. So we have to understand how to discriminate characteristics of the dharmas, because dharmas are created from discrimination. So something is right and wrong, good and bad, we are creating a dharma of good and bad, right and wrong, and create these through discrimination by creating dualities. So if we know how to discriminate that, by that I mean to know how to perceive, how to realize, how to understand, how to see it, then that is to be unmoving within the cardinal meaning. And that means to be unmoving, seeing. Okay, so this is the end of the chapter 4 of Platform Sutra, Meditation and Wisdom. If you have any questions about this, if you even appreciate the commentary, because I'm happy to just read along, but I feel like sometimes it's so complicated that for myself to make sense of it, I have to describe it interpret it my own way, only just to be able to make meaning of it. Otherwise, it becomes very, very hard to make sense of text. Anyways, let me know what you think about this chapter 4, and if you like it, subscribe. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you. Chapter 5 of the Platform Sutra. Chapter 5, we talk about seated meditation. My understanding is this one is going to be a pretty short one. Yes, it's only a few pages. And this one is going to be talking specifically about sitting meditation. I might even be combining this one with, no, I won't. I'll talk about this one in a separate episode, but this one should be very short. Anyways, if you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Take care for now. Bye-bye.